Check Podcasts.
Hi, I'm Bruce Williams. I'm the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to Chamber Chats, coming to you, as always, from the podcasting studios here at the Czech Media Group. I'd like to be, they're one of our chamber champions, by the way. I'd like to acknowledge right off the top that we, of course, live and work in the land of the Lekwungen-speaking nations known to us as Songhees and Esquimalt, or Cossapsum nations. And all of this is made possible by the support of Island Savings, a division of First West Credit Union, who are changing what banking can do for people, for community, and for the world. Little anecdote, little story. We very often will encounter people who are not managing very well in their lives. They will be on the street possibly with a hat or a box or a cup, asking for us to help them out, to help them make ends meet. And very often there's a message there that will say, "Bless you, thank you for helping me." There's a guy that has a sign that says, "Change my day," asking for change in his hat. I saw one, though, about a month ago that kind of turned my head around when someone said, "Please help me, I have a brain injury." Which then got me thinking about the idea of brain injury, which has come up in conversations about people experiencing drug overdoses and head trauma and things like that. So what we're going to do today is talk about that and how far along we've come in an understanding or a dealing with people who live with a brain injury. For example, you may have seen it. Take a look at this video.
You see me fidgeting in class, so you think I'm not interested.
You see me forget your name, and you think I don't care.
You see me lose my temper, you think I'm a jerk.
You see me stumble, you think I'm drunk.
You see me fine, conversing and smiling and enjoying conversation with my friends. What you don't see is the struggles that it took to get there.
So yeah, there you see it's somebody who fidgets or seems to be impaired in some way or other, or they have an anger issue or something. We're going to talk about that today with Pam Prewett, who is the Executive Director of the Victoria Brain Injury Society. Pam, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's just in my lifetime, even in the last 10 to 15 years, we've come to a greater understanding of what it means to experience a brain injury and live with that. So tell me about the beginning of this organization that you run.
Sure. So Victoria Brain Injury Society, which I'll refer to as VBIS, because that's how we talk about us around here. We began as a grassroots initiative in 1983 because a group of volunteers recognized a glaring lack of resources for people with acquired brain injuries in Greater Victoria. So initially run by volunteers, it grew and grew and helped fill a void in services for brain injury survivors and their families to navigate the complexities of living post-brain injury. So we're now a dedicated organization committed to education, advocacy, community support, and housing support. And we focus on empowering survivors to regain control of their lives following a brain injury.
Yeah. It's one of those things that culturally and through time people have almost made fun of. You know, somebody would get bonked on the head and they would see little birdies and you'd hear tweety sounds and stuff like that. But we've come to really understand how serious this is, right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So the awareness of brain injury is definitely on the rise, and that's partly due to high-profile cases with sports and military and other sectors, along with advances of diagnostic technology. So as we understand the complexities of brain injury, the public attention shifted towards preventing and diagnosing and supporting those injuries and recognizing them as a public health issue, which they are.
We've seen that almost being a career limiting factor for athletes, especially in hockey. Is it Eric Lindros, I think, that had to retire because of successive concussions? So that it's around us everywhere, isn't it?
It is, and concussion is definitely a huge issue.
So when we see someone who's exhibiting behavior that we might consider to be a bit, I'm going to say unique, or something that shows that they're under struggle, it's pretty fair for us to assume that they might actually be dealing with a brain injury, right?
Yeah, and you're right, Bruce. Brain injury is often mistaken for something else. And the symptoms that people who have a brain injury exhibit, like memory problems or personality changes or emotional instability, they can mimic mental health disorders or cognitive decline. And that leads to misdiagnosis and stigma. So, um, when brain injury is not disclosed properly or recognized, like in post-concussion syndrome, for example, that often appears very similar to depression or anxiety disorders with mood swings and fatigue and concentration difficulties. So, without knowing all of the full picture, survivors don't necessarily receive the support they need, which prolongs their recovery.
Yeah, and that impacts their family and their friends and their workplace. We're going to talk about all that stuff shortly as well. But I want to go to something I mentioned off the top. More and more now, when we hear about drug overdoses, when that happens with people, we at the chamber and we all are doing what we can to make sure that recovery and treatment beds are in place for these folks. But every time someone suffers a drug overdose or goes through one, that's considered a factor at a brain injury, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So what happens is during an overdose, oxygen deprivation, which is called an anoxic or a hypoxic injury, can cause a severe and long-lasting brain damage. And with the ongoing opioid crisis, overdose-related brain injuries are unfortunately increasing. And that presents unique challenges in recovery because survivors not only need support in managing their brain injury symptoms, but potentially with substance use disorders as well.
There are parts of our body that can heal themselves. How much can the brain heal itself?
Oh, that's a really good question. So, following a brain injury, the neurons are actually destroyed. So they never come back. But they do find different pathways in the brain, which is neuroplasticity. So that can lead to rehabilitation. And with time and with other supports, people can get a little bit better for sure.
Yeah. There's a stat that I don't fully recall right now. I tried to look it up, but I couldn't find it. The relationship between people who are incarcerated or in prison or in jail and the number of them that actually have a brain injury. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So there have been studies done that reveal there is a high prevalence of traumatic brain injury among incarcerated people. And injuries, especially if you're young, can impair impulse control and judgment and emotional regulation, which in turn increases vulnerability to criminal behavior. So, fortunately, there are some justice systems that are considering brain injury screenings as part of the rehabilitation program. And that aims to address underlying issues rather than the behaviors themselves.
Yeah. Having a brain injury impacts someone's overall ability, as a matter of fact. And we want to talk about that when we come back. Our guest today on Chamber Chats is Pam Prewett. She's the executive director of the Victoria Brain Injury Society. So it's not sort of like, okay, you're brain injured, end of story. That can just go down so many different pathways. And so tell me about the different classifications, if you will, of brain injury.
Sure. So at Vivus, we work with survivors of acquired brain injury. So, acquired brain injury is something that happens to your brain after birth. So, ABIs, acquired brain injuries, can be classed into two different breakdowns. So, there's traumatic brain injury, which happens if you're hit in the body or the head. So, like a car accident, a concussion, any kind of external force to the head. Symptoms can range from mild to severe. And then there's non traumatic brain injury, which results from internal factors. So that's somebody who's had a stroke, somebody who's had oxygen deprivation, tumors, or exposure to toxic substances. Um, and those symptoms can vary widely, but they also include problems with motor skills, memory, reasoning, speech, that kind of thing.
Threat of brain injury is why we wear a helmet when we cycle and when we motorcycle and when we play football and other sports, right? That's why we do it.
Yep, absolutely. So that helps protect the brain for sure. But the good part is there with the societal increase in the knowledge of concussion in particular, there are a lot of concussion protocols that are happening in sports teams and schools and in professional sports teams and little league sports teams. So all of that helps prevent brain injury.
So someone's life is completely upended by this quite often, sometimes quite profoundly, sometimes a little bit. But let's talk about it in terms of someone's employability or their ability to carry on with a career they might have been involved with. That's a factor, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of times a brain injury, the symptoms can really affect how you can work. So There, lots of times survivors struggle with concentration and memory and communication skills. Those are the kind of cognitive and emotional challenges they have, but they also have physical challenges. So they can have extreme fatigue. They can be really sensitive to light. So you can imagine how difficult it would be to have a brain injury and work in an office environment with bright lights and a lot of background noises can be intolerable. So it's really hard for a lot of brain injury survivors to have the energy to work through a full day. So, look, fortunately, one of the things that we do here at Vivas is we help our clients get back into the workforce. So, learning how to, one of the big ones is learning how to talk to employers or potential employers about their brain injury and maybe some accommodations that can happen in the workplace to make it easier for them to return to work.
How do people connect with your services? How do they end up working with you?
A variety of ways. So they can be referred from their family doctor if they have one. They can be referred from community service organizations in Victoria and the Greater Victoria area. They can self refer if they hear about us. They can be referred from family or friends. One of the things that we're really proud of to keep it as low barrier as possible for brain injury survivors and their families to come to our organization. We don't require proof of injury.
Okay. I just think about the people that so many of us see all the time who are living a life that is not comfortably housed, if you will, or it's a challenge to house them. There must be a pretty prevalent element of brain injury among those folks, right?
Yeah, do you know what? Housing is the number one issue for our clients. So to find safe, affordable housing in Victoria is difficult for everybody. But when you throw in a brain injury and somebody who's been off work for a while, so their income is affected, um, or they're on person with disability support, the PWD support for housing is $500 a month. So I don't know where you can find safe, affordable dry housing in Victoria for $500 a month.
No.
So yeah, it is a struggle. And one of the things of so what we find with our clients is a lot of times they'll end up in not a safe environment, particularly if they also have substance abuse issues and they want to be in a dry support subsidized housing. It's really difficult to find, and having a safe roof over somebody's house is the number like, that's they're gonna get better if they have somewhere safe that they can go to at the end of the day, but a lot of times we find that our clients, don't have a safe place to go or they're not living in a house, so it really impairs their ability to get better.
Yeah, I don't want to get all political here, but the fact that those resources aren't really sufficient, more resources towards supporting those people would probably save other costs elsewhere in the system, would it not?
Yep, it's
Yeah.
a vicious circle, absolutely.
Okay, so someone has come down with a circumstance where they're brain injured in some way, shape, or form, but it doesn't stop with them. What do you do to help, for example, their family members, spouses, kids, people like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So our mission is to provide all the supports to brain injury survivors and their families as well. So we have a monthly support group for family and caregivers. We offer a program called Acquired Brain Injury 101, which we offer to brain injury survivors, but we have a special one that's just for caregivers and families. We have case management for families if they need some support. And we provide resources in the community where people can go to get extra assistance.
Yeah. Who pays for all this?
That's a great
Thank
question.
you.
Um, so we're a nonprofit. So we do have a service agreement with Island Health, even though we're an individual organization. So we have a service agreement with them to provide support and our programming. We also get funding from the Brain Injury Alliance, which is funded through the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions. And I actually sit on the board. And then a large part of our funding is through grants, um, private, public, and government grants, and individual donations, which we rely on heavily. And all of our programs are free to our clients. So it's really imperative that we get those donations so that we can continue offering programs to people.
Yeah, the resource you can put into client care also has to go into raising money to keep your doors open too. So that's one
Yeah,
of the
absolutely.
that's one of the realities of all of this stuff too. No, the next question is one that's always worth asking. That is, what would these people do if you weren't there to provide that service? And we'll talk about that next. Our guest on Chamber Chats today is Pam Prewett, who's the executive director of the Victoria Brain Injury Society. So you're doing all this amazing work with these folks, Pam. You haven't always been there. What if you weren't there now? What would these people be faced with?
They would go to other mental health supports, probably provincial, local government supports, or other social service agencies. There's some other disability organizations out there which are fantastic, and we work with them closely. But Vivis is a unique organization providing unique support that's specific to brain injury survivors.
That's your core business. That's what you do. It's not like
Mhm.
somebody's doing that and a bunch of other things as well. So
Yeah,
that's good to
exactly.
know. I want to break this down a little bit if I can. What's the age balance with you? Like you do all ages, I'm sure, but what's the difference between a younger person, a middle-aged person, and an older person?
Yeah, so we typically see clients that are 18 years and older. And then we also have a support group for youth with concussion, and that age group is from 16 to 25. But the age groups are the brain injury affects different ages and depending on the stage of life. So with children and young adults, brain injuries can really affect critical development milestones and impact cognitive abilities and social skills and learning processes. Um, with adults, particularly those who are in the age bracket where they're working, brain injuries can lead to disruptions in employment and daily functioning. And adults can also experience long-term cognitive deficits and emotional dysregulation and difficulties maintaining relationships. We see that kind of thing all the time. And then in older adults, they often experience brain injuries from falls or from medical conditions such as strokes. And for that age group, the impact can be more severe because they may already be dealing with age related cognitive decline. So a brain injury can exacerbate the issues and lead to increased dependency on caregivers and healthcare services. So,
And as the older you get, the more used to get to doing things the way you do them. And all of a sudden, you've got this interference and the disruption of a brain injury. Now you have to deal with that. So the older you get, probably it's more difficult to deal with.
yeah, absolutely. And it's also a bit more of a strain on the healthcare system and families and support systems as well.
You have some specific therapy programs that you do that are pretty cool. For example, you have one that's equine based with horses. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so that's actually a really great program. It's one of our most popular ones. So we have a fantastic partnership with Together in Stride, and we go out to Heart Lake Farm on the peninsula. And what it is, it's a program that teaches people with brain injuries, and even they can bring along caregivers or loved ones, and they work together with a horse. And there's special Newfoundland ponies that are specially trained to do equine assisted learning. And so what they learn is how to do nonverbal communication, how to trust. So they work with the ponies and they go to different stations and they have different tasks that they have to do at each station, whether it's like make the horse walk backwards. So they have to figure out how to do that by working together with their partner and also working with the pony. So it's a really cool program and we found it to be really beneficial and we're super happy that we can offer that one.
Yeah, animal therapy just has that sort of different whole dimension to it, right? That you're with a gentle creature that's going to help make your life a whole lot better.
Yeah,
So
totally.
our brains is what tells the rest of our body what to do, whether it's by instinct or whatever it might be. So if you had an injury to your brain, how can that and does that manifest in challenges in other parts of our body?
Sure. That's a really good question too. So, brain injuries can often disrupt balance and coordination. That can lead to difficulties in mobility and increase the risk of falls and subsequent injuries. Motor control issues are common in brain injury survivors, and that makes them require ongoing physical therapy to regain stability and coordination. Another aspect of physical health that's impacted by brain injury is muscle tone and strength. So, for some survivors, a brain injury may lead to muscle spasticity or weakness on one side of their body. And that can make everyday tasks like walking, dressing, and even eating more challenging. And brain injuries also affect internal systems. So, disruptions in the brain's ability to regulate heart rate and blood pressure, which we see often, can cause dizziness or fatigue or fainting. And many survivors also experience chronic pain and headaches, which can be debilitating and impact quality of life.
Is there any correlation between brain injury and diet? Does that, like the way the brain either process food in our body or the things that some people need to avoid?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's become a hot topic in, the news and in the public too, is blueberries and brain,
Yeah.
but it's true. Diet does play a crucial role in brain health and also recovery from a brain injury. So if you have a balanced diet that's rich in essential nutrients, that can help reduce inflammation and promote cellular repair and also support overall cognitive function.
Yeah.
Also, proper hydration and adequate protein intake is vital because dehydration and insufficient protein can slow down the healing process and impair cognitive function.
Is fish really brain food?
It is, yes, it's so true. Omega-3 fatty
There
acids.
you go. This is a bit of an obtuse question, but I'll ask it anyway. Is there a variance in the incidences of brain injury between rural areas and urban areas in different parts of the province or regions of the country? Does that differ?
It does actually. So if you're looking at BC, for example, brain injury rates vary significantly between rural and rural areas. And that's because in rural areas of BC, there's higher rates of brain injury linked to increased risk from occupations like agriculture or forestry or resource extraction, where incidents like falls or equipment related injuries are more common. And also, there's limited access to immediate medical care in remote regions. So that can mean that brain injuries are not diagnosed or not treated as quickly, which could potentially lead to more severe and lasting impacts. And then you have urban areas like Greater Victoria and Vancouver, where you see more sports related injuries or traffic accidents. Um, Though they're typically quicker access to and also in urban areas, there's quicker access to medical facilities, so that can help improving outcomes.
This is important work, and I'm really glad we had a chance to have this conversation, Pam, to learn more about what you do. The Victoria Brain Injury Society could always use your support. If you have any way that you think you can support these folks, please be in touch with them. Pam Prewett is the Executive Director of the Victoria Brain Injury Society. Pam, nice to see you again, and thanks for your time.
Thanks, Bruce.
I'm Bruce Williams. We'll see you again for another Chamber Chat.